Welcome back to the Raid Addicts Guide to the Nighthold. My name is Zafu, and in this video I'll be covering the strategy for heroic Star Augur Etraeus, one of the 5 bosses you can choose to face after defeating Triliax. Star Augur is a 3-phase single target DPS burn with a relatively tight enrage timer. It requires strong execution, but the mechanics themselves are not particularly challenging. A typical heroic group should attempt this boss after Spellblade and Croesus, though many guilds will find it challenging at lower gear levels and should consider attempting High Botanist or Tichondrius first. The basic premise of the encounter is that the boss will use a set of 4 abilities that are modified to some degree in each phase. The tanks will need to contend with gravitational pull and starbursts, and the raid will need to deal with the ejection and nova spells. Before pulling, drop 2 raid markers for your range to stand on in the ice phase, one behind the boss and to the left hand side, and one behind the boss to the right hand side. A third marker under the boss to complete the triangle can be helpful for referencing. These markers should all fit within a druid's efflorescence. Assign half of your range players to one marker and half to the other, with melee occupying the marker underneath the boss. Shortly after engaging him, the Star Augur will open the planetarium's walls to reveal a frozen world. This heralds the beginning of the Frost phase. The boss will now spam cast Ice Burst on the tanks, dealing AoE frost damage to all players nearby. Tanks should separate themselves from the raid and avoid standing on top of one another. The gravitational pull spell in this phase will place a large purple circle around the tank. Throughout all phases, tanks must stay away from other players while this purple circle persists. After a few seconds, a meteor will land and apply a heavy frost dot to the affected tank. To clear this dot, the tank must move into a cluster of players to dispel the debuff, before moving back out to handle another falling meteor. This cycle will repeat 3 times per gravitational pull. The reason we have set up markers should now become clear. Removing the tank dot twice upon the same cluster of players will encase them in ice, preventing them from taking any action. To counter this, the tank should move to each marker in turn, and never contact the same group twice within one gravitational pull. If possible, try to have both tanks clearing on markers in the same order. It's worth noting that our tanks actually found it easier to simply soak 2 stacks of the debuff with cooldowns before clearing. If your raid is low on range players, give this a try for yourselves. Frigid Nova will deal incredibly high frost damage to each individual in the raid, but reduce this significantly by being closer to other players. For this spell, simply have your raid collapse back onto their markers to split the damage. Don't be afraid to use healing cooldowns to help with healing if required. Icy Ejection will place a blue circle around several raid members who will begin pulsing for high AoE damage. Players with ejection should move away from the marker until the debuff wears out, then swiftly move back in. At 60%, the Fel phase will begin. The boss will move the planetarium to reveal a Fel-infused world. Immediately, Icy Burst will become Fel Burst, a high damage direct attack that leaves a short damage over time effect on the tanks. Fel Ejection will now apply a 7-second debuff to each affected player, and will begin spawning fire beneath their feet. To counter this, simply take small steps with the debuff and try to confine the fire to one side of the room. We use the door as a reference point for this. It's very important to keep one side of the room completely clear of fire to make the Nova easier to handle. Fel Nova will deal huge Fel Fire damage to anybody close to the boss. This damage is decreased based on distance. To handle this, simply have the entire raid move to the edge of the planetarium until the cast is over. If you have a stampeding roar, be sure to use that here too. Gravitational Pull will again pull 3 meteors in quick succession onto the affected tank. This time, the meteor will land, clearing any fire patches on the floor, so tanks should move through the room and find safe places to clear. It may help you to mark the tanks for this phase, so players can clearly see if they need to move away, before being caught by a falling meteor, which is almost a guaranteed death. At 30%, the boss will move the planetarium one final time to reveal a void-torn world, signalling the start of the void phase. The raid should immediately collapse onto the melee marker for this. The boss will now chain cast Void Burst, which applies a stacking dot to his target. When this dot wears out, it jumps onto two nearby players, affecting them both with half the number of stacks that the original player had. Tanks should be careful not to let this stack too high upon themselves, as this will have a much larger impact on raid health when the debuff jumps. The gravitational pull will now summon one meteor instead of 3, but this will coalesce into a large ad named the Thing That Should Not Be. This ad will shield the boss from damage if it's not taken to the far edge of the planetarium immediately. Tanks affected by the gravitational pull should move to the edge and wait for the ad to spawn. This ad should then be the priority target for all DPS. The Thing That Should Not Be will frequently cast Witness the Void, a raid-wide AoE spell that will fear any players that are looking directly at the ad when the cast goes off. All raiders should turn to face away from it before the cast is over to avoid the fear. Witness the Void will deal 100% additional damage on each subsequent cast, so it's important that the ad dies as quickly as possible. We burned Heroism and second potions on the first ad to get it down as quickly as we could. Void Ejection will deal moderate damage and spawn small ads in this phase. These ads are not dangerous and simply add stacks of Void Burst to any melee target. They should just be cleaved down. Void Nova will also just add an additional stack of Void Burst to everyone in the raid, and can basically be ignored. Depending on your raid's DPS, you may wish to ignore the second Thing That Should Not Be in favour of simply nuking the Star Augur. We found that we could easily handle this providing the boss's health was at or below 15% when the ad spawned. Save raid cooldowns such as Barrier and Spirit Link Totem for the second, third and fourth Witness the Void casts if you choose this strategy. After 3 minutes in the Void phase, Star Augur will cast Big Bang, instantly killing all players. This is the Hardened Rage. In summary, Star Augur Etraeus is a DPS check with some basic mechanics that can be executed well with some practice. If your raid can remain calm and keep strategy consistent, the only challenge posed by this boss is his enrage timer. If you like this video or you've learned from it, please be sure to let us know by leaving feedback below. If you'd like more guides, please subscribe to the Raid Addicts YouTube channel to be notified as we release more content. Thanks for watching.